US Sport.
On Off the Ball.
With 888 Casino. 18 plus cgamblingcare.ie.
All right, it's time for us to look back on a pretty wild and interesting weekend of NFL action. There's already been some casualties in the last 24 hours. The offensive coordinator and I think the QB coach of the Raiders is gone because they've started so badly. Cian, good afternoon, good evening, good morning.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I believe that's the 6th in-season coach change the Raiders have had in the last 5 years, something along those lines. Basically, they change their offensive coordinator every single year. It's like you have a bad quarterback. For some reason, your offensive coordinator and quarterback's coach doesn't look good. I don't know why that happens. I can't figure that one out.
A well-run franchise. Michael, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Where do you want to start? We start with the Lions because they're the best team in football at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair statement, and I'd probably be the number one skeptic in that regard because they are a team built around Jared Goff, which is one thing, but because they're also spending all this season playing in domes. But this weekend, kind of like if we put that down, like you can't make that argument right now because they destroyed the Packers essentially, and they did so in a game where the ground was wet. They were playing in outside conditions. They weren't in a dome. It was conditions that in theory favoured the Packers. But the Lions were the team that executed. They executed as if they were playing in a dome still. Montgomery and Gibbs set the tone. Incredibly good work in the backfield. Those two, they complement each other so well. Montgomery is like not on the downturn of his career, but he's the established running back. He's on his second team, but he's still going well. Gibbs is the one who's ascending, and he's breaking off these runs that are ridiculous. The touchdown run on 4th down in the first half, the big play that led to that came from him as well that set that play up. The two of them just make everything around them so easy. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown was catching everything, opposed to the Packers receivers who were dropping everything, while the offensive line was having loads and loads of penalties. So it was one team that had a complete disaster day, and one team that did its usual. We're kind of a factory line now of we just execute everywhere. It doesn't matter who's on the field, who's missing, who, like Jameson Williams is out, Aiden Hutchinson is out. Doesn't matter. Everyone around them is going to step up and make plays, and that's the culture they've built in Detroit.
I love their 1-2 running backs. You talked about it. It makes me think sometimes it's like, shouldn't every team have a serious number 2 running back, someone that they... I could see, even just watching the Rams, you could see Sean McVay. I've got this guy, Corum, who they got in the 3rd round or 2nd round maybe, on my Dynasty League, so I've been kind of keeping an eye out for him, and they've been trying to ease him in. He's trying to do that 1-2 punch, but he's not as good as Kyron Williams. But if you get someone at a similar level that can do slightly different things like Montgomery and Gibbs can do, it's an unbelievable weapon, because if you're just there, like Jared Goff has played well this year, but his numbers aren't outstanding, and the Lions are putting up huge scores. And it's because they can just run the ball down the throat. And you've seen even a few examples like in this game, but even in other games, teams that run the ball. The Titans ran the ball all day yesterday, and when it came to overtime, the Patriots defense just had nothing left. It is unsustainable to just keep defending the run all day if it is getting yards and yards and downs and downs. So it's a really well put together offense, and obviously their defense as well. You can miss probably the best pass rusher, the top 3 best pass rushers in the NFL, and they haven't missed a beat. So I don't know, if you look at the Lions score differential over the last year and a half, including this season, you look at their win-loss records, you look at everything, even though they're one of the favourites for the NFL, and you even start this by saying they're the best team in the NFL, I feel like we're underrating them. I really think that they should be prohibitive favourites for the Super Bowl this year.
To get there anyway, because once you're up against Mahomes, you can't make anybody favourite. I think
anything can happen. I
and he might not make it.
We underestimate Goff as well. I know he's not what they hoped he was when they drafted him at the Rams, but he's a different quarterback, and I think he can do the job that he's been asked to do in that Detroit offense very, very well.
And he's getting increasingly mature and better. I don't know if you saw any of the Belichick stuff. Belichick had him on. I don't know if he was on the show or not, but Belichick was saying what you're doing is amazing. Which, obviously he's saying everybody's amazing at the moment. Yeah. They all have lovely
Mr.
bottoms.
Positivity, Bill Belichick.
He's not. He tried to defend that Patriots run defense that Mick was just talking about, and they kind of proved him wrong last week by the sounds of it. But the thing we have to talk about as well with the Lions and that offense is Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, who could have had probably not any head coach job last year, but he would have had one of the bigger ones if he really wanted to go for one. he has the offense humming in such a way that it's like the play calling is phenomenal, but the execution everywhere is so good. That's always a reflection on the coaching staff. He's going to be a massive key, and I think when we come to the offseason, he's going to be the number one guy, the guy that every single team that needs a head coach is going to be trying to hire. And once he goes, that's when the question marks will probably come about the offense and about Dan Campbell overall and the whole organisation of it. But Mick's right about Goff. Like, he's an interesting one because you could still say he's underrated, and you could also argue he's overrated at the same time. It's one of those weird ones where he sits in that range just below the higher quality quarterbacks. But what you have to say about him, like over the last 2 weeks, right, they've blown two teams out essentially, and he's thrown for 200 yards combined in the 2 weeks. So the last 2 weeks are not about Goff at all, but he's been fine the last couple of weeks. Where it comes down to for him is how he's going to do when there's not play action passes, when there's not wide receivers breaking off huge gains, where the running game isn't dominating. That's the question marks. And in the playoffs, all you need is for 1 or 2 games of him to play well in that situation. The last time they went to the Super Bowl, or the last time he went to the Super Bowl rather, with the Rams, he did that against the Saints. He played very well against the Saints. And then in the worst Super Bowl I've ever watched all time, I was in New York watching it. I'll never forget that Super Bowl because of how bad it was. He didn't show up, and the Patriots were able to absolutely abuse him. So that's really the difference. Is he mature now, like you talk about? Will it be different in those scenarios? And we just won't know that until the playoffs, because as a regular season team, I don't know how many more games they're going to lose. Like, they should be the number 1 seed.
On the Hutchinson thing, obviously the trade deadline is, I don't know what time our time tomorrow, but it's tomorrow anyway. We're recording this on Monday.
Not much else going on in America tomorrow.
A good time to bury some news if you were, for example, the Raiders trading away your best pass rusher and one remaining good player. So like they should be going all in. I'm not saying all in, not like the Rams all in, but that worked for the Rams. I did a couple of years of penance afterwards. But try and phone Cleveland and ask about Myles Garrett. See what the price is. Phone the Raiders. See what the price is. Is Brian Burns injured at the moment? Is he not playing? Is he good enough? Phone the Giants and go, come on, you're not going anywhere.
Well, if he's not injured, he hasn't been doing a whole lot to stand out, because I haven't really noticed him this year. I kind of forgot about Brian Burns, if I'm honest with you. The thing that it's a great point, because while the defense was effective and good at the weekend, the Packers did also have, I think, 8 or 9 drops, and they were big plays. They were throws downfield, and whenever you're dropping balls like that, it's covering for the defense. Like, they tried to blitz more than they typically do. In the first drive in the first quarter, they should have given up a touchdown when the Packers' backup running back dropped the ball over the middle when they sent, I think, 7 players after the quarterback, and Jordan Love just flipped the ball over them. They've had to do more stuff like that. Previously, they wouldn't have blitzed as much as they have. They're going to have to figure that out. If they don't trade for someone, it's going to be big pressure on the defensive coordinator to try and dial up these blitzes and disguise their coverages and stuff like that. You saw that with the 49ers last year. They weren't able to really do that when they couldn't get the pressure with the 4-man rush. So they're in that situation now where I think they've built to a point where it makes sense for them to make a really aggressive move. It's like, the way I kind of look at this is, let's say they give away their first round pick next year. Already at this stage of the year, it's guaranteed to not be a top 10 pick. So you're not giving away a superstar elite prospect. You're giving away a highly rated prospect at a certain position.
But
you've got so many of them already. Yeah, you've got so many of them already. Realistically, it's not going to set you back.
Yeah. And don't forget, this is a team built on that trade with the Rams. When the Rams went all in, the rare mutually beneficial trade. And, so they're not under a huge amount of cap pressure as much as I understand it anyway. And they're in decent, they haven't traded away future drafts as far as I know either. So you can go and get a top prospect. And also you get them cheap this time of year. You just do. You can get a first round level talent for a third rounder at this time of year. So yeah, I think it's worth it, but I do think the team as currently built certainly still feels like they're good enough. We should mention though that Jordan Love was very clearly injured, and it was one of those, it was probably a game time decision. They probably decided you might not do yourself any more damage and we can go out and we're still better off with you than with Malik Willis, but he was not able to make up the ground. He wasn't able to turn, it looked like, and that cost him a few times yesterday. And you do have to wonder, okay, the Lions were in the rain in Lambeau and, everything was working against them, but they came up against an injured quarterback, and you wonder how much that evens out by the time they play again in Detroit later in the year.
The pick six really highlighted that, because he tried to run into the right flat and he just realised he wasn't going to escape. And then he made a crazy decision anyway, tried to throw the ball to the running back, who was probably going to be tackled behind the line of scrimmage regardless, with no time left and no timeouts and no time left in the clock at the end of the second quarter. But yeah, you're 100% right. Like, a fully healthy Jordan Love is a completely different factor for the Packers. Although at this stage, Jordan Love has been hurt so much this year, I don't know if we're going to see a fully healthy Jordan Love again. So the Packers probably are what they are right now.
Yeah, and look, I think the Packers could be better than they were. There is an improvement to happen, and so maybe he gets slightly fitter and some of those players come back. I think they are also going to be a decent side. Let's rattle through a couple of these. The Bills-Dolphins. The Dolphins season is done. Are they sellers at the deadline here, or is he going to actually learn a lot from this season?
It was a great
I think
game.
they're one of those teams. Really? You called that a great game? I hated that game.
Oh, so enjoyable, yeah.
Oh, but no, it wasn't. This is what has ruined football for me. By halfway through the game, Josh Allen had thrown 21 passes for 80 yards. Tua was doing the same thing. None of them were throwing the ball downfield. You've got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I know Josh Allen doesn't have that many great big playmakers outside anymore, but he has that chaos factor that's gone. He's now Chad Pennington. He's just throwing the ball to his 5-yard curl routes, his 5-yard out routes. We're this super efficient offense that goes nowhere. I hated that game. Yeah, true. To be fair, once they broke off that final, the big plays in the end, they finally came. To be fair to them, but yeah, I do think the Dolphins, like in theory, should be sellers. I don't think that's the mindset of Mike McDaniel or the organization as a whole. They're probably thinking, who can we buy over the next 24 hours to try and catch up? And maybe because they're in the AFC, you can make that argument. Like, look, right now they have 6 losses, so technically they can still go 11-6. If they do that, like they'll still be in the playoffs.
If they were to reel off 9 games in a row now, you'd be like, wow. Yeah,
but it does happen. You know what I mean? I've looked at their schedule. I don't think it will happen because their schedule isn't necessarily easy. So I think they should be selling, but I don't know who they're going to sell either. Like someone like Jalen Ramsey, what's he really going to bring back at this stage of his career? He's still very good, was very good yesterday, but I don't think he's going to bring back like draft capital that makes it worthwhile.
I think they only spent a third on him. They got him very cheap, maybe a third and a sixth when he ended up going. It was very low, but like somebody like him, they might sell because you get your third back. You've had it for a couple of years. You thought you had a window. The window was never open, it turns out. I don't know, maybe those receivers, maybe.
Yeah, we saw an offense yesterday that they'll have to think of beyond this year as well, and think like, fine, maybe Tua isn't. We're going to have this massive question mark over his health, possibly
Forever.
for the rest of his career. Yeah, and I think there's going to be still question marks, and rightly so, about his talent level and his ability to get the job done. But however, we did see him yesterday at a level that reminds you why, like, you know, he's a, you know, top half probably starting quarterback in the NFL. Doesn't mean he's elite, but, you know, he got Waddle cooking, he got Hill a little bit. I think he got Hill more into things, and A-Chain looked alive again, and suddenly that's an offense that makes a little bit of sense. And it did at least towards the end of that game, and they ran the Bills very, very close. If there was another drive in the game, who's to say they wouldn't have won it? You know, so the Dolphins are dead because of their record, but I think it's because of Tua's injury. I don't think they're a bad team.
They don't consider trading Tua at the window for somebody?
Don't know where the market is.
Who's going to acquire him with the concussion question marks over his head? The thing is, we've probably completely overlooked the Bills here because the Bills played fairly well. Like, they created turnovers, they created big plays off those short plays that I was talking about with Allen, where he wasn't trying to make the crazy stuff he used to do in the past and extend plays and like that. They went for it in fourth. I think it was early in the third quarter or late in the second quarter. They drew up a beautiful play to get Matt Collins wide open. There was a lot of really, really good stuff from that offense on that side of the ball. But what really summed this game up for me was the very end of it. I know Mick enjoyed it, but I bloody hated it because at the end of the game, the Bills are just outside of field goal range. They've had this awful drive trying to get into the field goal range where they're missing passes and throwing completions, all that kind of stuff. And then they get to a point where there's 10 seconds left or 17 seconds left, and they throw the ball deep downfield, and they're going to hit Dawson Knox down the middle, and Dawson Knox drops the ball, but it's a difficult catch anyway, so you don't really blame him. But it's actually what saves them, because if Dawson Knox had caught that ball, the clock would have run out, and they wouldn't have had the opportunity to kick the field goal. And that 61-yard field goal was exceptionally good. I don't know how he managed that, considering they were trying to cut him a couple of weeks ago. Like, his name escapes you right now, but they were trying to actually get rid of him.
Is it?
He missed an extra point in the game as well, and then hit a 61-yarder to win it. Like,
but that's kind of the knife edge that kickers live on. Like, one week they're trying to get rid of you, and the next week you're hitting a 61-yard field goal to win the game. It's an incredible life to have, and we've got an Irishman over there right now who made his debut at the weekend, but we probably won't talk a huge amount about, but he kicked for the Giants last night.
Yeah, Jude McTominay, fair play. Like, it's now he needs to get a contract. This is the verge of him getting one. If you can do this for a year or two and then you get a deal and you stick around and you become close to perfect, you know, it's on the verge of a breakthrough. But there's loads of people, we should quell a little bit of the enthusiasm here. There's loads of people who reach this level play a game, come off, play another game, come off, play. When was it whoever the last group were on coming over from the States? We had one of the kickers in who was years and years and years and years around the place. Yeah, exactly. Until eventually he made it for the Steelers. Yeah.
He's a Super Bowl winner too, wasn't he?
Yeah, but it took him like 10 years to become an overnight success, and then you make it. November 19th, there is a league meeting at which it will be decided whether or not Ireland are getting a game next year. So apparently,
I think we're all on the side where that's going to happen, right? That's got to happen at this stage.
In the background, most of the deals are done. The election is a slightly complicating factor in that will it be a good thing or a bad thing for politicians to be seen spending money, investing in bringing an NFL game to Ireland? What about the housing crisis? Do you know?
Our election. Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that.
I thought the same thing. I know. What's Trump got to do with this?
Literally nothing to do with Trump and Harris. It's our Harris. And whether or not can we be seen to be spending money on this? Or is this actually like, yeah, you're bringing the party, it's great?
God, I think
if
it's established that it brings money in.
If it's the Steelers, like we hope it would be based on the past and how much Dan Rooney has talked about it, they travel everywhere. So that would be a huge influx of people if there was an NFL game here.
It's not the Giants and Panthers who are in Germany next week.
That's
the Munich's game next week.
It'll definitely be the Steelers because they've done all the work in getting it up to happen here. And if it happens once, there's definitely a view that it would happen every second year then. The year that they have the 9 home games, and so we would be their 9th home game every second year.
Wow.
And I think, to your point about the travel, right, it is true, but there's no lead-in for people. So if you're planning a trip from Pittsburgh to Ireland, you probably aren't planning it on, well, maybe you could plan it on 9 months' notice, but way more people could plan it on the year after next. We'll go, look, we'll put that in, everybody starts saving, because it's 20 grand to all in with the cost of our hotels, which is obviously very expensive to bring 2 or 3 people over. But that's
put it down in Cork. It's grand. The cheaper hotels down here. We can do it in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It'd be grand.
I mean, Páirc Uí Chaoimh might be, that could be a weekend of college football games if we play our cards right. Anyway, sorry, that was my up to date on the latest information that I have about that. So we're just 2 weeks away from finding out exactly what's going to happen. You want to talk about the Chargers? Jim Harbaugh's getting it done.
Yeah, I really like where the offense is going right now because J.K. Dobbins, there's someone else in my mind who I'm definitely forgetting about. You guys might know. But J.K. Dobbins seems like the obvious comeback player of the year candidate right now. He looks so good. Again, another week where he's played quite well. But the key to it was against the Browns. Ladd McConkey has figured out his role in this offense, and the Chargers have figured out his role in this offense. He's not a slot receiver necessarily, but he is making all the possession plays that Justin Herbert desperately needs. He's someone who can get open quickly, which allows them to convert those 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6s, which previously they didn't have anyone who could do because he has these longer receivers like Joshua Palmer and Quentin Johnson outside who can run downfield but can't really make the quick sudden movements over the middle, and he doesn't really have a tight end right now who's standing up like that. Will Dissly, generally good, been injured a lot over the course of his career, but a little bit inconsistent at this stage. I do think this team's kind of coming together and getting better as the season wears on, which is a key detail for any team, any developing team in particular. The 2 touchdowns they had this weekend for Johnson and Palmer were both blown coverages, so that's a lot of the Browns being bad rather than the Chargers being good. But on the other side of that, the Browns were hitting him every second play. They sacked him like 6 or 7 times. Myles Garrett was living in the backfield. Herbert was taking an absolute beating, which is a bad thing, obviously, and over the long term will cause problems, more problems than it actually, and then they can overcome. But at the very minimum, that means this offense was playing well to overcome that, to beat that pressure over and over and over again. So there's reasons to be excited about them. Defensively, they look better as well. Now, I know Jameis will give you turnovers. That's kind of what Jameis does. That's who he's always been. But still, was it 100 at the weekend?
No, that was his 100th interception
in his career.
Oh yeah, I know. I didn't mean did he have 100 turnovers this weekend?
That was the specific reference this weekend, though. I presume there's a bunch of other fumbles that.
You'd imagine so. He he tried to get a 50-50 season one year at Tampa Bay, I think, wasn't it? But it didn't quite work out.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting with the Chargers that you look at how on its day how that offense hits, and you've got the coach, you've got the quarterback, and you've got a conference that's going to allow an imperfect team to make the playoffs, and you give them more time together, and you give Herbert with this offense plus Jim Harbaugh with this team, I just think they're going to be a dangerous team when we hit the playoffs. And I'd be fairly sure they're going to make it, because you look around the AFC at the moment, you can't see, maybe the Broncos. I don't think they're very, very good. And everything else is in the AFC North. So it's like the Bengals. It's not going to be the Browns. So who's that 7th team? It's almost certainly going to be the Chargers. So they're going to have a long season to go and figure this out, and can make mistakes along the way and then be a danger when it comes to the playoffs. So they're an interesting team.
Yeah. The Steelers beat them, the Chiefs beat them, and the Cardinals beat them so far. So they're the 3 defeats that they have in the season so far. You like that? That's the number 1 favourite. Kirk Cousins is evens to be the comeback player of the year.
Cousins, yeah.
J.K. Dobbins 5-1. Yeah. Joe Burrow 5-1. DeMar Hamlin 17-2. Hamlin had some amazing play at the weekend. I remember flicking over at one point. Whoever it was down by contact.
Yeah.
They ripped the ball out of. Am I going to get this right? They ripped the ball off.
Was it A-Chain?
No,
I remember the play. But Hamlin seems to be involved every time I see the Bills play. He seems to be a playmaker.
How's he come back player this year when he came back last year? I don't know.
Did he not win it last year?
I think he might have won it last year, yeah. Strange.
I don't think he did.
He's going to get it for life.
They did. He
didn't get
him. No, I don't think
he
so.
He didn't come back from the dead.
I think they changed the rules.
As opposed to from an Achilles.
I think he played one game basically last year, or the equivalent of in stats, and now he's a starter.
You're right, it was Beckham. Yeah,
he punched the ball out of Odell, and Odell looked like a baby. And then luckily he was down his knee was down. Anyway, sorry, we digress. The Saints-Panthers game, this is mostly interesting because Michael Thomas, did you see any of this?
I didn't see the tweets, but I heard that he was on a storm about their car.
You always do love an out tweet storm from a jilted receiver. So if anybody hasn't seen it, Chris Olave, I think, takes one of those horror tackles where
scary.
His head and neck are kind of exploded into, but the way Michael Thomas has it, the ball is kind of in the middle of the field over his head. So he's got to go for it, but he's leaving himself defenseless.
Yeah.
And the guy who hits him has more unnecessary roughness defensive receiver hits than anybody else since he's joined the league.
Okay, well, and yet I would say that the reaction of the 2 Panthers players that hit him showed you how serious it was immediately. They kind of panicked a little bit. It's funny, I heard somebody say that Olave's best way, Olave's best way to approach that play when it was such a hospital pass was to actually protect himself, to put his hands up over himself. But no receiver's going to do that, because you'll be a meme and you'll be called a coward, and but I mean, that's actually what he should have done in that scenario, but obviously could never do it, so had to put up his hands and leave himself wide open for what was almost a certain hit. It was always coming.
In the same vein, if Olave did that, it would have been similar to what Anthony Richardson did last week, taking himself out for a play. That would be the same reaction, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
The funny thing is, as much as that safety you can paint as an awful guy and all that kind of stuff, that hit is not actually that bad. He doesn't go into Olave. He's actually lowering it down and trying to get lower and getting below into his chest. He's stopping rather than actually exploding into him. It's one of those hits that, unless you fundamentally change this sport even further than you already have, that hit is always going to exist. It's just an unfortunate situation where you have a cornerback on his back and you have a safety in front of him, so he's getting squashed and his momentum is going to keep going. What Mick said there, the only way he could have avoided that is by curling up and protecting himself and not even trying to look at the ball, which actually does happen. They kind of have to do it kind of subtly to avoid the obvious thing of, I'm not trying to get this pass. I think Michael Thomas, his criticisms of Derek Carr in general, I'm not sure how much you can say, it's Derek Carr's fault that the receiver got injured. It's a hospital ball. It's a horrible throw, but that also happens. It's not like he did that on purpose. It's not like he's trying to get his receiver hurt. But the overall thoughts of Michael Thomas are kind of accurate. It sums Derek Carr up of, he just panics and throws the ball up, and that's why receivers end up getting hurt who play with him. I mean, Michael Thomas is also a curious source, because in that tirade he was talking about how the Saints told him, he's jealous of Chris Olave being the number 1 and that's part of the problem and that's why he's not on a team. Michael Thomas is 31 years of age. I know he's had a bunch of injuries and he's slowed down. He shouldn't be a free agent. He should at least be somewhere having an input. So maybe there is character issues behind the scenes. But overall, to be honest with you, the main talking point from this game for me was Derek Carr has now lost to 31 NFL franchises, and in a month he plays the Raiders, and he could be the first person to ever lose to every single franchise franchise ever play the game, but he's also already the first person to ever lose to 31 teams. So Derek Carr is very much the symbol of what this league does with quarterbacks these days. If you're good enough to hang around, it doesn't matter if we lose with you, we'll just keep you around to make us look good. And it's that stuff I was talking about with the Bills Dolphins game, where we're no longer about trying to win games and chase big plays and make mistakes. We're about cautious, conservative, and losing games. Great.
It is a bit mad. He'll be cut by then, though, right? Or he won't be cut, but he'll be benched by then, will he?
I don't know. The guy who came in for him probably wasn't much better, but I suppose they do have to look to the future. They're not going anywhere with Derek Carr, so it is hard to know. It's hard to know. Like they're obviously going nowhere now. They lost to the Panthers. They've had 2 wins. They've lost 6. They've lost 6 in a row, having gone 2-0 and scored like 150 points in their first 2 games. So don't really know what happened there, but there's a talent deficit on that team. You know what I mean? They're relying on, I know because thankfully I've got him in fantasy, but like they're relying on Alvin Kamara, who's 29 years old, to do literally everything in their offense. And obviously we're probably not going to see Chris Olave again for quite a while. I would imagine it's the second concussion of the year and his 3rd overall. So
yeah, his brother was agreeing with almost everything that Michael Thomas was saying on Twitter, by the way.
Jeez.
All right, so the Texans, this is an overreaction. Are they in trouble?
I think it possibly is an overreaction, but I'm also just very concerned because if you watch that Jets game, like, I had no idea how they lost. Like, the Jets were awful. The Jets were not good in that game. Like, similarly, like, you just mentioned the Saints somehow losing to the Panthers. If we talked about that game even further, the Panthers were bad. The Panthers didn't play well to beat the Saints. The Saints somehow managed to lose to a team that was dropping the ball and turning into completed passes into interceptions and missing screen throws. Like, it wasn't like they elevated their level. And it was the same thing with the Texans and the Jets last week on Thursday Night Football. CJ Stroud has taken a small step back, and that was to be expected because his rookie year, everything just went his way. And now things aren't all going his way, but he's still playing very, very, very well. Their problem is the injuries at wide receiver. Like, Tank Dell's a very, very good receiver, and he's a great option to have, but now he's essentially their only option at wide receiver. Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs both injured. Collins should be back. Stephon Diggs is done for the year. There's just too many question marks there. Joe Mixon has played very well as well too, so it's one to watch. I'll say, like, they've some level of trouble. They're in a division where they'll easily make the playoffs, and they'll be at that end of the year. They'll still be competing, but you have to build towards it. Like we talked about with the Chargers, it's kind of the opposite with them. They're coming from a point of, we know you're very good and we expect you to be very good, but like Laramie Tunsil leads the league in false starts, I believe. The offensive line as a whole is just putting Stroud in more difficult positions than they ever did last year. And there's too many question marks for me right now to feel fully confident in that team in the way I did probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, where I would have said this is probably one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the league, if at very minimum 4th or 5th.
So my question on that is, can they do anything to change it? Because they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to win. It's the worst division. The Colts aren't going to go on any kind of a run, and we know that the Jags and the Titans certainly aren't, right? So they're going to win that division just by default. They've got a good all-round team. They've got a good defense. They've got a good quarterback. They've got a good running game. They have all the receivers are injured. If Collins does come back, it changes things. Is there someone they can go and get? Like, I'd be more interested in what's out there for the Texans than actually the Lions conversation that we had earlier, because it might just be one piece. It might just be they went out and got Diggs. You know, you talked about this a good bit, Keane, before the year. That might have been the missing piece for them. And then he's gone. He's out for the year. They do need someone to replace him. I don't know what's out there, but you would imagine there's something on the market between now and tomorrow.
The only one I can really think of, and this one is possibly a bit of a stretch, but we're at the point where it's a bit of a stretch because we've already gone through the Amari Coopers, the Devontae Adams, the other receivers who've been moved. The only one I can really, really think of is, could you potentially look at DJ Moore in Chicago? Because I think the Bears have realised after this weekend, we're not going to be going to the playoffs like we thought we might have a chance of doing. This is going to be a full-on rebuild with Caleb. We've got our defence pretty good. Our offence needs to be figured out. They have Keenan Allen there. Keenan Allen's washed up. DJ Moore, I think for the right price, it might make sense for both teams. I don't anticipate it happening, but it could be something that would make sense. The only other ones you're talking about, like someone like Jalen Waddle, but yeah, but
like, I don't think he's a game changer, but, you know, does he fill a gap for a little while? You know what I mean? Until you have Collins back, and then you try and get Collins Dell. You have Williams catching 2 big passes a day. You know, someone like that you could get for nothing and just kind of keep things ticking over for a little while, because I think that's what the Texans need. You know, they just need some momentum.
Actually, Mick, sorry, I just thought of the perfect one. Calvin Ridley from the Titans. He's like I know it's in division, so it's going to be more of a challenge. But the Titans know, like, they're basically tanking. You saw how many yards he's put up over the last couple of weeks. He's still able to play. He's also not a long-term piece for them. They know they need to rebuild that whole position. Him and Tyler Boyd are still in Tennessee. So there's two options. Even Tyler Boyd might make sense because he comes in, fills that role, and then he slots into the third option in the offense behind Collins and Dell when the other two, when Collins comes back. And that's kind of perfect for what you need. It's not as good as having Diggs, but it's still good enough to be to compete at the end of the year, I think.
Yeah, if you've got money and you have a young QB on that first contract,
don't waste it.
Spend all the money, spend all the picks, and like you'll be able to navigate whatever comes next. And like worst case scenario, Stefan Diggs is going to be back next season. So, yeah, hopefully there is a bit of trading in the next 24 hours. Hopefully by the time this goes live, something big has happened that we've just missed.
That usually happens to us, actually. Our podcast is a great harbinger for activity in the trade market, yeah.
Garrett Wilson's touchdown catch, I just watched it side by side with Odell's. Odell's is a 50-yarder thrown against the Cowboys. He's both feet off the air when he makes the catch. It's a very good catch. You end up nitpicking with this and people are like, oh, you're not impressed by that. Of course you are. It's an incredible catch, but Odell's for me is still slightly better.
I was hoping one of you would disagree with me. I'm the exact same. And the other thing about it is Odell had the defender hanging off him like a cape. Like, as far as I recall, like the fact that Odell could even stay as upright as he was with the defender hanging off him, I think it was Morris Claiborne at the time. Like that catch, I don't think. So every single year, and the reason we have to mention this is what Garrett Wilson did was incredible. But every single year we reach a point where we get, it's not as good as Odell's catch. And I just don't think we're ever going to get one that beats Odell's catch. There's a reason it transcended the NFL coverage. Everyone knows that catch. People over here who don't know what the NFL is have seen that play. And I think that will continue for as long as I'm alive anyway.
They should also see Saquon at the weekend. I did. What was he doing?
Did you see this live,
No.
Saquon? So I saw this live. And it's funny, the commentators were like, whoa, Saquon Barkley. And I was like, they're underselling how incredible that was. And it turns out they'd kind of missed what he had done with the backwards leap because they saw it the replay and then they lost their shit. I was like, I've never seen it. Like, how did he know when to do it?
I don't know.
And by the way, he'd already done a full-on Madden spin move to make the first down.
So explain to anybody who hasn't seen it. What happened?
As best I could say is he caught a screen pass outside from Hurts. He had about 4 yards for the first down. He did a beautiful spin play, like a Madden little spin, out for the first down. And as three guys are coming into him, he's facing backwards after a spin move, and he just does one of those wide receiver or one of those leapfrogs, except completely backwards, gets it. And then, of course, as he lands, three guys get him down. He gets another 6 yards or so on the fall. So, as someone they said, probably the greatest 13-yard reception of all time.
He leapt backwards over a guy who was running towards him and landed and missed him at exactly the right second.
Everything perfect about it, yeah. It was one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. To happen at that speed after a spin, that's what I'm saying. Like, so he could not have been not a little bit disorientated when it happened.
Do you know the way, like, in football when someone, like, scores a corner and there's always a question mark of, like, how did they do that? Is that a fluke? Is that an accident? Or did they mean that? Or did they see something? Or even a long-range free kick, something like that. And you're always kind of going, or like, get a cross in. That's kind of what this feels like to me, because this could have very easily been something where he just jumped and hoped for the best. And I don't think that's what it was. Because as Mick says, when he's doing that spin, you can see him turn his head just slightly, just before he starts to, he shifts his weight down to spring up. He 100% saw that defender coming, I think, and purposely jumped backwards and then flattened while he was in the air. Like, he brings his chest to his knees as close as possible, like a gymnast going over a beam or something like that. It's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And, like, it wasn't the catch, but like, if you want to talk about plays that will last in your memory when you're talking about the Odell catch, that's the one for me from yesterday that I'll remember for years to come. And look, it just sums up what a season he's having. Mick, you came on here for week one after the first game of the year, and you're like, that's Saquon, look how good Saquon is. Everyone remembers how good Saquon is. And that's just continued for this year. Like, he's healthy, he's in an offense that sets him up for success, and he's very clearly happy in a way that we haven't really seen him before. Because when he was in New York, I know the whole famous thing about the pressure of the New York media, but he was never painted in a picture of enjoying himself. He was never really like smiling on the sideline and kind of the jovial way he is now. And now it's all you see with him, and it's kind of great to see. And it's exactly what we need, because the running back position is getting this rebirth this year, this renaissance of value and impact that makes the sport better, in my opinion.
It's a great point about the moments that you remember. I'll tell you how I felt last night when that, like, I had my phone charging in the kitchen, and it was, I reached for the phone. I reached for the, did you see that? And I was like really angry that I didn't have my phone near me. It was like, I was like, that's a great little litmus test of whether something was worth, banking in your memory or not. Like,
it's astonishing. But it is that point about the running backs, and you want to talk about Saquon or Derrick Henry, who's having the best season. Like, if you could guarantee that 3 of your running backs were going to be fit, you would pay 3 of them to last the whole season, not to wear them out, wouldn't you? Like,
so, and then obviously if you could afford to lose one as well, then I don't know. It's hard to know. Like, you have to have everything around them. You have to have the line that's able to get the most out of them, and even the quarterback. But yes, at the moment, I'm thinking. I said it last week. I think we've become now the point where I think we've massively undervalued the position, and I think we're at a turning point.
Yeah, and like the qualifiers everyone does. This isn't a you thing, Mick. This is something that everyone does where you have to have a good offensive line, you have to have a good setup for it. But that's true of every position. Like, how many quarterbacks are great but actually look terrible because they all have a bad offensive line or they have wide receivers who can't catch the ball? That kind of stuff gets overplayed, I think. The Derrick Henry and Saquon thing to me is like the 2 of them are now like leading the leading stars of that position, but I think they're going above the position as well, where they're kind of setting the narrative and the tone of the season for their teams as well. I think Saquon is the better running back, but Derrick Henry, the season he's having, in a way it defies logic and in a way it doesn't, because a running back of his age with his many carries, his many touches over his career, and I'm talking about a career that goes back to high school where he had 1,300 touches on his team in high school over 4 years, which is absolutely an insane thing to do to a teenager. But that's how good he is, and like he's having this career where he's kind of going to look back on it and put up numbers that no one else in this era is ever going to put up. He's already at over 1,000 for this season. He's on track to do over 2,000 this year, I think. That he's averaging over 6 yards per carry. Now, all of this is impacted by Lamar Jackson setting him up, because everyone has to pay attention to Lamar Jackson, so he's getting more open space than he ever got in Tennessee. Yeah. But he still has to be able to take advantage of it, and he's doing that at an age where most running backs are slowing down and struggling. We just said Michael Thomas, a wide receiver, is 31 years of age. He can't stay in the league because of injuries. Derrick Henry is about 30 now as well, similar age. How many injuries has he had over his career? A couple, but not many that have had a lasting impact.
It is interesting, though, that the same thing is happening at Philadelphia, where they also have now a running back or a quarterback who is in the running form of his career as well. So,
Hurts was okay. Now, I didn't see most of the second half when I believe that the Eagles were awful, but Hurts is looking like he's coming back into a little bit more form, which is interesting. The Henry stuff, the touchdown he got was at the end of the first half, might have been in the third quarter, where he just like took about 4 bangs on his way through, and it was just that he felt like he was like the cheat code in Jonah Loma rugby, and I was actually thinking of like there's receivers who can go on long and they'll get to the outside and maybe not take the hits. He invites the hits, and you just can't tackle him. And take rugby or NFL, and I can't think of anybody comparable over this long a period of time.
No, it is insane.
It's incredible.
Whether or not it lasts all the way into February is the one concern you'd have for the Ravens at this point. Right, anything else we need to talk about?
Well, Mick mentioned moments there, and we didn't bring up the biggest moment of the weekend for him, and I don't even think I need to introduce this, do I?
Well, no. Well, like the Patriots lost in overtime, and it came off the back of
about the moment,
Drake Maye interception in overtime. But he had the ball in his hand for 12 seconds as they got down to the last play of the game. They'd had a few goes at it, and eventually he throws it off to Ramondre in the end zone and scores the touchdown. And it was Drake Maye's introduction as a Patriot quarterback, and it was brilliant. And I have to say, right, I have my oldest child is 5 in January. So for the last 4.5 years, I've been very, very, very attuned to watching sport at night time quietly. Right? Like, I mean, that's a long time in your life. That's 4.5. There's a lot of big events that have happened over the course of that time that have happened kind of post 8 o'clock as you're watching sport. And I've been very good at it. I've had 1 or 2 mishaps over 4.5 years, but in general, I have kept some incredible emotion down. And as this was going on, because it lasted so long and it looked like it wasn't going anywhere, and I just went, yes! And was scolded immediately for being...
At 4.5, they can wake up now, it's grand.
Not exactly acting. Well, yeah. Sometimes they can wake up, but let's not wake them up for no reason because of an insane father downstairs screaming at sport. But it was welcome to the Patriots, Drake Maye. And look, he lost the game. He still hasn't won he won as a starter, but Jacoby Brissett did all the work last week. So there's a long way to go, but he looks good. His running is really, really good. He seems like he's got the arm. He's got things to work out, but he's playing on a terrible, terrible team, possibly the worst team in the NFL. So, yeah, there's some excitement there, I have to say, for the first time in a few years.
I'll trade him to you for Saquon Barkley in our Dynasty League, Mick, if you want. That'd be a fair trade, wouldn't it?
I'm all right.
You don't love him that
Picked
much.
up Bo Nix, actually. I'm starting to give up on Patrick Mahomes as a fantasy player. I'm struggling.
Right. That
And
is
you went
this
to Bo
week's-
Nix.
No, he's my third choice. I'm just I need some younger legs at quarterback just for the future in case something happens.
This is why I don't play fantasy
doesn't
football. I
understand
can't
that
be
I don't have any
swapping
other
Bo
choice.
Nix for Patrick Mahomes.
No, I'm not swapping him. Still have Mahomes.
Right. Next week, we will have the final teams that will be representing each of the franchises for the end of the year because the transfer deadline day will be over. They are really missing a proper deadline day.
If they cared about this, they wouldn't be putting on the same day as the election.
They might have thought that one through a bit
This
better.
is nonsense. That election's been set for many years.
Right. Cian, thanks. Mick, thanks.